half. Got it. And I wanted to share with you guys some of my insights, as well as things for you to consider as you reflect, on your own lives and see if this lifestyle kind of appeals to you. So let's get into it. If you don't know what a digital nomad is, it's essentially a person who, works online in whatever location you desire. So that could look like traveling around to different cities in the US, or also traveling to different countries while you work remotely. What's kind of the allure of choosing this lifestyle? It's not just about like remote traveling and work, although that's great. It's also like a decision to break away from sort of the conventional norms and explore a world that's not necessarily as bound by some of your day-to-day constraints. So you embrace this sort of newfound sense of freedom and flexibility. You choose where you want to be, and when you want to work, to some extent, you get to broaden your awareness of world and people. You immerse yourself in new environments, cultures, experiences, and that pushes you out of your comfort zone and encourages you in adaptability and a broadened perspective, which is a lot of personal growth. So all of these challenges you're navigating of language barriers and unfamiliar customs, they become kind of like a stepping stone to forge resilience and resourcefulness. So if you're thinking about why you choose this path, remember, it's not just like accumulating passport stamps. You're also collecting memories and insights and this profound sense of personal agency. Whoops. So I just wanted to share with you guys, if you are interested, some practical insights and kind of tips that I've gained from traveling so far. And I wanted to start with just the general trip planning, because if you can't really like leap into something, if you don't have a plan for where you're going to land. So you might want to go, but you don't know where you want to go. The world is a really big place. There's a lot of destinations, and it can be kind of overwhelming to make the initial decision of what to do. So my suggestion is, there we go, to basically create a list of all of your dream destinations, and to jot down those sort of like special events or occasions that are tied to specific times of the year. So then you can take that information, you understand and look up visa limitations for each of these places. And then before you book anything, look at both Google Flights and Airbnb if you're doing Airbnb or whatever accommodation at the same time, to make sure that there's like comprehensive cost and availability comparison. So an example of doing this process is like knowing that you want to see the northern lights in Scandinavia, and that's in winter, but you also know you want to see the tulip blooms in Amsterdam in spring. And then you look up visas. You can only be in that part of Europe for 3 months at a time. So that means that you would be going to Norway in March to be there for winter, and then you would go to Amsterdam in the spring, and then you would leave by May. So it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, but it is helpful to kind of break down the thought process of how do you plan out so far in advance these big kind of trips. When you do this, you end up having like a ton of bookings there's just a lot of moving parts. And I really was thankful for Google for having Google Sheets as an option to keep yourself organized. I created a bunch of these sort of templates to put in all of my information, and it's like one source of truth, that you don't have to dig through a bunch of different emails to find out like, oh, where's my address for this place, or what's the reservation code. So I mocked up a bunch of these as templates for you guys, and Jen is going to share that link with you that you can use to your own heart's content. You know, you'll just make a copy of it yourself, and then you have that later on. You don't even have to use it for like a big trip, something like this. I used it just a few weeks ago when I went on a 2-week trip, and it was still really helpful in figuring out where I needed to be over the course of 2 weeks. So now that we've kind of looked at a big picture of how to plan, I just wanted to go into a couple of those details. So if you have your list of dream destinations, you need to check visa limitations. A lot of countries actually offer digital nomading visas. But yeah, so like I chose to go to Malta initially because they have one of these visas. But if that doesn't quite work for you for whatever reason, you can also do things on a tourist visa. And in my case, I did actually end up going on tourist visas only. So I had thought, you know, okay, I'm going to do this like Maltese digital nomading visa and be there for a year and kind of travel around on the weekends to other places. And it just didn't work out that way for work with me. They didn't want to deal with sort of the tax headache on their end. So instead, I was doing tourist visas. And since I was staying in Europe, that's kind of what I'll talk to more so. Basically, most of Europe is part of what's called the Schengen area, if you didn't know. And as an American citizen, you can be in these parts of the Schengen area for 3 months at a time before you have to leave for 3 months. And so that really helped me plan out how I was going to move around, because I only had in my mind 3 months to be in Europe. Then I spent a month in a different country. So I was in Malta for a month, Italy for a month, and in Greece for a month. And then I had to get out. So instead of going all the way back to the States, I would find countries that were close by. So it'd still be a relatively cheap flight. Like I went to the UK for a month and a half. And then I went to Turkey for 2 months, so that I could kind of wait out that limitation for the visa. And then I would go back into Schengen to go like Germany for Christmas markets, that kind of thing. And then, as I was saying, because I was doing a tourist visit, or I've been doing tourist visas, it essentially just kind of leads to having shorter stays compared to these extended long visas. So that definitely influenced how I chose my accommodation. Because I was really only staying in a place for a month at a time, which I also wouldn't recommend moving to more places than, like, don't go week by week, because that's a headache and exhausting. Give yourself at least a month in a place. But because I was doing that, I chose Airbnb, because even though it might not be the cheapest, it was still like, there's a lot of advantages to using it in this way. Just because it's simple, it's user-friendly. You know, you're going to places that are fully furnished. You don't have to worry about trying to find an apartment and do leasing and all of that. So my recommendations, if you were to do this route, is you should rent by the month because they give discounts. You should find a room within a larger household, because there's a chance that you'll make friends that way. But even if you don't, you'll still have people that you know when you don't know anyone else. And it's also cheaper. And I would also just really thoroughly read through the reviews, specifically looking for things about Wi-Fi. All of the other reviews are important, but Wi-Fi is king. If that doesn't exist, like, it's not going to work out no matter how beautiful the place is, because your job depends on it. So building community was my biggest fear when I decided to do this. I really thought, like, oh, I'm going to be so lonely and isolated. And I think someone's on the call with us, but that's all right. But
no, the camera's off.
so yeah, I was really nervous about this because I'm very much a homebody and thought, oh, I'm not going to have friends close by, any of that. But actually is kind of the opposite happened. Even though I don't think I'm the most outgoing person, being in this kind of lifestyle, you really become an extrovert very quickly because you kind of have to survive. But I've never been anywhere that I haven't made friends. And that can be through a lot of different ways, either through the roommates that you have from Airbnb. It can be from going on group tours and just meeting other people that are doing the same tour that you're doing. You can invite friends to come and visit you. I've had several experiences where I was on the bus and struck up conversation, and weirdly, that happened multiple times where I made friends that I hung out with from being on the bus. Bumble BFF is a great app if you're just looking for like a quick make friendship date kind of thing happen. And also online dating is, if you're not with someone, you know, it's like an easy way to meet up with someone quickly if you just want to go out and have someone pay a drink for you. Yeah, so that is not as big of a concern as it initially seems like it could be. So packing, I hate it. It is the challenge that even with the practice of doing it all the time, it's my least favorite task. I know where everything goes. I've done it so many times and I still find myself procrastinating until the last minute. So nevertheless, though, let me give you a glimpse of what made its way into my travel arsenal. Oops, there we go. All right, so I opted for I opted to not do any kind of rolling suitcases, and I embraced sort of this like no roll philosophy, only relying on bags that I could carry. So essentially I'd have like a backpack on my back and a backpack on my front. And I did this because the idea of dragging a suitcase along cobbled streets and up like 4 flights of stairs, it just sounded miserable. And I didn't resonate with me. Although also carrying your stuff like doesn't have it, like it's also not all it's cracked up to be. It's exhausting. It fosters a lot of resentment towards all of your things. I would get into a place and throw it down and say, I never want to see this backpack again. But all that being said, a few items that were surprisingly really helpful were like compression packing cubes. They're really helpful to organize and compartmentalize and kind of make smaller for your wardrobe. Dry bags were really helpful. Those are bags that you would normally take to like the beach to keep your stuff dry. But I also use them to store dirty tennis shoes in. The few times that I did go to the beach, I had something to put a wet swimsuit in, things like that. It was really helpful. Another thing you might not think about is bringing something small that's almost decorative that you can put in your space to make it feel like home. So that could be like coasters or photos. I brought a little candle that I would put next to my bed, and it kind of, you know, would have like a sense memory of feeling like I was at home. And then in the vein of lessons learned, like excess is a no-go. So too many shirts, shoes, these are all culprits. My initial over-preparedness was like packing for multiple seasons during an extended journey. So I had like a sweater and a beanie while I was in Athens in July. And it's just like, that's a bad idea. That's too much. Just buy it when you're en route. So just prioritize, you know, what's essential and what's actually enhancing your journey while you're there. So these are also some financial products that can make your journey a little bit more financially savvy. If you don't already have a credit card with good travel benefits, I would try and secure one. I use Chase Sapphire, and I've had several pretty substantial flights, like from here to the UK, that have pretty much been paid for completely by points. Some countries, like cash is the way to go. So it's wise to have a debit card that's also travel friendly. So Schwab, they don't charge you for ATM fees. They pay those back. So that's a great card to have. And then for like saving in communication, also T-Mobile is a really good phone plan to have because they have a global coverage plan in like 200 plus countries that has unlimited texting and data. And even though your Wi-Fi and internet, your data, it's like pretty slow because I think it's 2G, it's still really convenient to have that when you come into a new place because you still have some service versus having to find a place to buy a temporary SIM card and your number stays the same. So that's good. And then I didn't put it in here, but if you don't have WhatsApp, that's a great app to download because it's like for a lot of places in the world, it's kind of like the go-to texting app. Yeah. Okay. So work-life balance. Work basically becomes or can become a much larger percentage of your life than it would be otherwise, especially in regards to your community, because those are the people that you see like on a regular basis throughout wherever you are in the world. So having good coworkers is really important. And a way to kind of maintain a good relationship with them is to maintain open lines of communication and clarify your working hours and kind of embracing a more asynchronous method of collaboration. Since I spent most of my time in Europe, I've been like 6 to 8 hours ahead, which means, I've got kind of a little bit of a luxury in tailoring my work schedule to suit my preferences. So it could be that, I want to work really early in the morning, take a break in the afternoon, mid-afternoon, and then come back in the evening to take meetings. Or maybe I want to take the whole morning off to go to a museum and then at 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. work and do all of my working business. Personally, I love starting much earlier because I love having my own like shared Figma workspace to myself without any distraction. But there's also some downsides, like meetings typically clash with dinner time. So if you make friends and they want to go out, you kind of have to figure out that. Feedback cycles can be really stretched out. You also bear a lot of responsibility and, communicating your schedule with your team. But basically, like, you need to be good at communication and flexibility with this kind of working schedule. So when you digital nomad, especially when you're doing it solo, it's really easy to underinvest in areas of your life other than work and travel, even though like life is so much more than just that. As human beings, we're more than just work and visiting new places, but kind of the hustle of adapting to new environments, from locating a nearest grocery store to discovering activities to trying to make new friends amidst work commitments, it can really leave you drained and exhausted with decision fatigue and burnt out, which leaves not a lot of room for other meaningful pursuits in your life. For me, I was able to find a little bit of balance back in this by maintaining a bullet journal. So that would be my recommendation for a thing to do. I'm not just a designer, I'm also an artist. So nurturing creativity was like really important to me. So I would assign myself each month to draw a snapshot, kind of capturing the essence of that month, a reflection of one of my destinations. And it not only provided like a gratifying creative outlet outside of work, but it also like made this tangible artifact that I can share with others. And it's like a really cool thing to have because it sparks conversation. It's a nice thing. It's a physical reminder of the experiences that I've had. It grounded me and allowed me to cherish like these moments that otherwise would have been shadowed by like all of the hustle of trying to move around. So I definitely recommend having like a non-digital channel for investing in your creativity if you do something like this. All right, so quickly, if I have time, I wanted to kind of go through a little bit of like personal experience to better highlight the fact that there definitely are a lot of highs. There's also lows in this lifestyle. And I don't want to just paint like a romanticized idea of what this is. So digital nomading can be really tough. You make connections and then you leave. You finally feel like you start to understand a place, and then you uproot yourself and have to figure it out all over again. So it makes sense that I would experience like a lot of inner turmoil when I went to Turkey for the first time. I'd been in the UK at this point for like a month and a half. And in that time period, I'd become really good friends with my roommates. I still am. And that space really felt like home, really more than any other place that I'd been. I loved living there. I had started dating a guy who's now my boyfriend, which is cool. But anyway, it was just like a really nice period of time. And also the UK was just easy because if you're an American, you know, the culture is like similar enough to not be like a total learning curve, and everyone speaks English for the most part. So I didn't want to leave. I was tired from traveling and I wanted to stay, but my plans had led me to Turkey, which I did want to go to. There's a lot of sites I wanted to explore and I was going to follow through, even though I was really sad to leave. My destination that I went to was Izmir, so not Istanbul, which is maybe more foreigner friendly, familiar ambiance. So I felt very much a foreigner when I arrived in Izmir, which is good. You know, it's very humbling to feel like an outsider and a good thing to experience, I think, and not just be in a comfort zone. But it was rough. I landed at night, so most things were closed. My internet wasn't really working, so when things weren't in the same language, I couldn't just Google Translate. I needed to get a metro ticket to get out of the airport, and I couldn't figure out how to do that. And then once I figured out how to do that, I had to purchase a ticket with cash, and I didn't have any cash, so I had to go find an ATM and then figure out how that ATM worked, and then find the metro place again, and then get to my Airbnb and let the host know I was there, even though my internet wasn't working. It was like a long, stressful day. And then I don't think I left the apartment for like half a week because I was just overwhelmed and feeling like I had made a mistake, even though I wanted to be there. And then also while I was in Turkey at a different point, I was laid off from my job. And that was really difficult to, you know, navigate all of that sort of emotional backlash while I didn't have like a really strong, deep rooted community there. That being said, there, you know, life is life wherever you are. So it's not all exciting and rainbows, but at the same time, I'm so happy I was there. Like I have so many memories of this like amazing, vibrant place. It's full of life and history, and the people were so welcoming. The food's delicious. You know, you can connect and make friends with people where your language barrier doesn't really matter at a certain point anymore. I'm just really grateful that, you know, I was able to sort of settle into rhythm a little bit of life while I was there. And I really cherish my time there. And honestly, I feel that way about every place that I've been. It's not just Turkey. It's, you know, every place can be great if you choose to have a good attitude about it. But no, Turkey was amazing. But all that to say, traveling is both. It's always exhaustion loneliness and frustration, but it's also joy and excitement and growth. So we've come to the question at hand. Is this for you? Should you stay where you are, or should you go to discover something else? Putting practical obstacles aside for a moment, there are valid reasons to consider why you should stay put. Leaving means that you do miss out on valuable time with family and friends, and it does and can impact those relationships. It means, forfeiting a stable community where not only can you be supported, but you can also really invest and support others. Volunteering and immersing in local causes becomes way more challenging because you're just not connected. There's also a possibility that you miss out on career opportunities due to time zone differences and reduced availability. Your kitchen's unpredictable, so it affects the quality of your meals. I've eaten a lot of, plain meals of rice and fried egg because I didn't have any spices. Also, healthcare coverage might not extend abroad for you. So if you have, any health conditions, that could pose a really serious challenge. So considering everything, there's still a lot of compelling reasons to embark on this kind of a journey. Digital nomading offers self-discovery and decision-making confidence and resilience. It reinforces your sense of place in the world and your contributions. Each day is like an adventure shared with cherished memories, new connections and friendships. There's a lot of curiosity and inspiration that, are just fueled and thriving. The world is like, it sounds very cliche, but like the world is your classroom. So this path has really enriched my life, and I'm happy that I've done it. But really, it's up to you what you'd like to do with this information. Whatever lifestyle you choose, I encourage you to have one that is filled really with pursuing your curiosity and also not being afraid of where adventure could lead. If you want to connect, this is my LinkedIn, email. I'm more than happy to keep up the conversation or also chat about anything else. If you're into RuPaul's Drag Race, I watch a lot of it. And I think if we have time left over, we're going to do some Q&A.
Yeah, we have plenty time.
Great.
Yeah, so are you done, right? So we can go over, move over to the Q&A session. And I do see a couple people have already left the question in the chat. Feel free to do that. I will go over from the top, or you can raise your hand and we'll call your name and can speak up. So let me check the question we had. So this is the first question from Melanie. Are you working freelance or working with a full-time remote employer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so initially I was able to go and do this because I was working with a full-time employer and the company was fully remote. I was able to go because it was still a startup. It was small enough and quite hadn't reached the point where they were really cracking down on this kind of thing. But yeah, is it interesting story. I essentially reached out to HR and asked if I could do this, and she just never got back to me. So I said, okay. And then I did it. But there were other people in the company that had done this before me. So I figured it was okay. And then that company, like a lot of other companies, did a bunch of rounds of layoffs. And so I was affected by that. So since then, I've been doing freelancing, which, it's also, I think that's another part of a question somewhere else. But yeah, it's hard. I think I mostly have worked with, again, kind of startups and doing more async, strictly design work where I could produce a visual for something and then just kind of send it in, as opposed to having to be on a much broader team since then. But I am also, like everyone else, kind of in this boat of post layoff of like still applying for work that's more permanent. But yes, for US based companies, though, I should say.
Melanie, do you have any questions, follow up, or are you very good with the answer?
Oh no, just that was it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. The next question is from the Akiliaha. I hope I pronounced her name correct. But the question is, how do you get jobs being a nomad, and what advice do you have for those new to UX and would like to do what you are currently doing? And what platforms did you use for job hunting or project opportunities? It's in the chat. I know it's a little.
Yeah, I'm reading through it. Did you get jobs? Yeah, so again, I don't know how helpful this would be. I have stepped away from UX a bit, and I'm doing more visual design. But so initially it has come down to a lot of networking. So part of that is like people that were familiar with the company that I worked with before have reached out, or people that I have worked with in the past and people that they know and job listings they've posted. But yeah, it's like, I don't know if I really have great advice for this because it's hard out there. But LinkedIn usually, honestly, is where I've been looking. And then also just if I know other people that happen to know someone that is in this realm and needs a designer.
Thanks, Jenna. Does anybody else have questions? Feel free to speak up.
I have questions. Actually, I have quite a lot of questions. So first is the tax. I know you mentioned briefly, but I think people here might want to know more. So
yeah. So it's not illegal, but it's not maybe the most legal. I was living with my parents for quite some time before I was living in an apartment, but because I knew I wasn't going to be in that apartment for a good chunk of time, I had my parents' address as my permanent residence. And then I have just continued to keep my parents' address as my permanent residence. And so for taxes and all of that purpose, I am a resident of Houston, even though I'm not here most of the year. But as far as that's as permanent as any address I currently have. So for taxes, that's what I would claim.
And when you were talking about the digital nomading visas, some countries are or were offering. So what were the restrictions you were seeing?
Yeah, well, so for me personally, it was that the company, when I spoke to my manager at the time about it, he was more of the mindset of like, ooh, don't push for that because it's a headache for the paperwork and tax purposes on the company to get one of those visas, which is why I did the tourist visa. But there are other limitations that I could have met at the time. But it was because my company didn't want to partake in it. But other limitations could be, you have to have an income level at a certain point. You have to prove that you have that job. You have to, show where you're going to be living. You have to not have a criminal record, these kinds of things. Yeah.
But what
a bunch of countries that have them.
What are the benefits of getting those instead of tourist visa?
Basically, the duration amount of time that you can be there. So like if you wanted to go to Spain and live there for a year, like it would be much better to have actual paperwork visa as opposed to just being like, well, I'm just a tourist and kind of flying under the radar. Yeah.
Makes sense.
And if you want to like have a bank account there or some of these like more life things, then having a visa that's not just a tourist is much more beneficial.
That's right. I think we have more questions in the chat. So
right. Another question from Melanie as well. What is your tech setup like? Just a laptop or the extra accessories that you found helpful?
Yeah. So great question. I initially, actually, I have it here. because I was thinking maybe I would use it, but I didn't. I have like a external monitor that I initially brought with me when I was traveling around. And I found I never used it, and it was just taking up space and heavy. And so I like shipped it back because it was too much. So that was the only other kind of like larger piece of equipment besides my laptop that I have. I always have, like noise canceling headphones, and I have a bag, which is like a tech organizer. And so that has like all of the cords that you need, as well as like adapters for not voltage, but for different plugs. But mostly I'm living on a laptop and a prayer.
Next question from Kira. Can you share any thoughts around safety while traveling? I'm interested in that too, especially thinking about how to balance keeping safety in mind while also wanting to meet others and have new experience.
Yeah. And I mean, this can apply to being in Houston too, right? It's anytime you're putting yourself out there, it's a bit of a, will things be okay? In this round of traveling that I have done, I haven't really gone to places that I have felt could have an immediate safety concern. Primarily, I've been in larger cities that have really good transportation. Not to say that, you can't be in trouble in that kind of an environment, but it's easier to have a backup, like an exit plan, if you know that like, oh, I can easily get on the train from here, as opposed to being in some really remote place where you're like, well, now I'm here, how do I leave? I don't know. I think, the advice I could give is the same that I would give anywhere. It's just like, be smart about who you're meeting up with. If you're meeting up with a stranger from online, go to a public space. I personally did a lot of online dating while I was traveling around because it was like an easy way to just meet someone. If you don't know anyone, people are more motivated to go on a date than they are like just a friendship hangout sometimes. But that was always like in a public place or a bar or something that I didn't feel that uncomfortable with. I know there are people that have like specific places that they always put their money on them and, that kind of thing. But I don't know. I've never experienced any problems with that. I think just be aware of your surroundings and yeah.
Thanks. And the next one is from Caroline. Do you know of any abroad courses, camps that focus on designs?
Any abroad courses? I don't. I know that I did Flatiron, actually, the boot camp for UX. And I had a friend that was in that same program with me who was doing it from Europe. And she was doing it from Edinburgh because she said that the programs in the States were better. So I don't know. I'm sure there are programs that exist, but I'm not familiar with them.
Next one is from Chelsea Hunt. What does tax season look like for you?
Yeah, well, I haven't gotten there yet, so that'll be a good question for me in a couple months. So my last tax season was very normal. This one will be a bit more of a headache. I think it'll be a lot of what is it? Not W2s. Yeah.
Well, you have TurboTax. We can use that.
Yeah, I have TurboTax, so I'm planning on their use, but I have only been working for US based companies, so it doesn't make it too complicated with like different foreign whatever their requirements are.
And next question is, finance-wise, what would be the estimate that someone needs to save up to start a journey as a nomad?
That's a good question. I should have that information. I can't give you like a real number because I don't have that number, but I can say it depends on your desire of advanced preparedness. So for me, maybe I overdid it, but initially when I started, I planned like 4 months, 5 months out from when I left. And so because I was doing Airbnb, I was already paying like a fee for those rentals upfront. And then I was also paying for like all of the flights. I didn't pay for any like experiences or anything like that. I just kind of figured that out when I got there. But as far as like, depending on how many months in advance you would want to prepare for and the flights and the staying, I would say at least, let's say like you're doing it for 2 months, at least 3,000 to 4,000, honestly, because you're paying for like 2 months rent in a place, at least two to 3 months rent, and then your flight to get over there, which is the most expensive flight. But it could be less than that. It depends on where you want to go as well. I think I kind of helped cut down on costs in that I chose to stay. If I went someplace expensive like the UK, I would bookend it by like much cheaper places. And so I was staying in Greece for a long time, which is a lot cheaper than the UK. And then I would go to Turkey, which is like way cheaper. And so it kind of helped balance out some of those costs where instead of thinking month by month, my rent is this, you're like, okay, but split across all 3, it's actually a normal price of rent that you would pay somewhere else.
The next one is just going to throw out the triplet app. That I'm not sure what, before organizing travel plans, I'm not doing digital nomading full time, but I travel a lot for work and it's very helpful service. Okay, that's not a question, sorry. But next one is, do you cook a lot? That's from Jane.
Yeah, I love to cook. And so that is genuinely a hard thing that comes about this lifestyle a little bit, because you don't always know what you're gonna get when you are staying in different Airbnbs. So yeah, I love to cook. That's like a very relaxing thing for me. And in some places I had the opportunity to like get to create whatever I wanted because the host, had the place very stocked well and also said like, yes, please, whatever is mine is yours, kind of a thing. I've also had it where I've been in a place and there's not been any cooking oil or salt and pepper. And you get really tired of buying little balls of olive oil and then having to leave them. So it's a mix. Sometimes you cook a lot and then other times you don't. And then sometimes, surprisingly, a lot of times when I've lived places with other people, they have often cooked for me and given me a lot of food. So that's a fun sort of cultural exchange too, because you get like a home cooked meal from someone that lives in the place, which is nice, even if you don't really speak the same language.
So I have a question to you, Susan.
Mhm.
I and my husband has been talk about, hey, we want to move out to Texas, especially this year with the heat going on over 100 degrees for months. But my question is, how do you overcome the risk of stepping out from your comfort zone? Because for us, we're thinking a lot and we're planning a lot, but more things like, what's about the cost and what about the lifestyle, what about the safety, and what about the job and stuff like that. It's just always a lot of things to stop you to do this. And how do you overcome all this sort of thoughts flying in the head?
Yeah, I think there's always, honestly, with any kind of change in your life, there's a lot of doubt that accompanies it. Before I went, even though I knew that I wanted to go, I remember having a conversation with my mom being like, is this the biggest mistake I've ever made? Like, am I hindering my chances of, like having a family or, like my friendship, all of these things. And I think you have to just give yourself a lot of grace and acknowledge that like we're human and it's okay if we're scared of things and if we're overwhelmed. Even when I would travel to, you know, any new place, I knew just from how I reacted to doing that, to uprooting myself, that I was going to spend like half a week hiding in my Airbnb and not leaving, forcing myself to go outside because I had to get groceries, but like just being overwhelmed by everything being new and not knowing anyone, and having to accept like, it's okay that I feel that way, that like I'm a human and wherever I go, there I am, you know, I'm going to be overwhelmed. Things are going to be scary. But I think it's the benefit of pursuing some of this stuff so outweighs the fear, and like the change in life experiences. You know, life happens to you whether or not you're an active participant in it. And so I think I just like choose to try to be an active participant, even though it like scares me a lot. I don't know if that was helpful, Ava.
Yeah, that's
Try to
helpful.
be a confidence booster. You got this. Get out of this heat.
Okay, is any other questions from the audience? Still 7:30 only. We still have a lot of time. Feel free to ask. Okay. Oh, I did see comments on the chat from let me find it. Fatima, I think she's mentioning about the using the Nomad visa in Spain. Just call it out if anybody missed it.
I can post a link. I just found it. But a little while ago, I was looking at some jobs for virtual fashion, just out of curiosity. And I noticed that the company was in Spain. And then they had some information that, oh, okay, well, if you're from the US or from elsewhere, you can get a work visa or a digital nomad visa, and you can just work there without it being the company's problem. Like, I think you can, there were two things. You can either get assistance from the company, or you can just go there and be a nomad. And you, so long as your income was 20% or less from a Spanish company, like from in Spain, you could be there and live as a resident. But they did have like some requirements, like you have to have a degree or 3 years work history or something like that. Let me see if I can find the link.
Yeah, they all have like different, they're similar, but like varying requirements when they're offering these kind of visas.
Cool.
Thank you for sharing. And just see Melanie sharing something as well. I think that's looked like a job board. Thank you for sharing that. And okay, I think I'm gonna wrapping up the events for today. And please feel free to put any kinds of useful information in the chat if you want to share. And a couple resources from us, some QR code for you to scan. And so you please, and this is some skill flags that you can do some presentation exercise. And this is our Notion hub. There's all the previous events info in there, and free UX resources you can access. So please feel free to check it out. And next will be our social media link. Jane, can you move to the next one? Social media link. So we are definitely more active on Slack. So please feel free to join, and we'll post job opportunities and upcoming events, and of course all the community communication and stuff is gonna happen over there. Join our Slack, and our next event is September 28th, and we're gonna talk about accessibilities and the universal design. We're looking forward to seeing any of the faces here for our future events. And thank you again for Susannah shared the wonderful experience. I'm gonna do some homework.
Well, yeah, thank you guys for listening to me.